Most people think they already know Billy the Kid, the smiling outlaw who shot his way across the Old West like some kind of American folk hero. But the truth is way messier. When you start digging into the real witness statements, the newly uncovered court notes, and the private letters between the lawmen who hunted him, you realize this kid wasn't just a legend. He was a walking contradiction. Sometimes he was a cold-blooded gunslinger who reacted faster than most men could think. Other times, he was a scared teenager caught between corrupt sheriffs, ruthless ranchers, and a territory that was basically eating itself alive. And the fresh evidence that surfaced in the past few years makes one thing painfully clear. Billy the Kid was far more dangerous, unpredictable, and complicated than anybody expected. Not because he wanted chaos, but because he was shaped by a world where violence wasn't a choice, it was the daily weather. Number 1. The reputation puzzle. Billy the Kid's reputation has always been bigger than the man himself. And that's the first thing people forget when trying to figure out how dangerous he actually was. Legends stretch the truth like taffy. Every sheriff, outlaw, and dime novel writer in the Old West exaggerated something. Billy became a convenient symbol for both chaos and charm. But when you peel away the dramatic retellings, you start noticing how much of his danger came not from being a cold-blooded monster, but from being a young man trapped inside violent circumstances where every wrong step created another enemy. He wasn't some unstoppable superkiller roaming the frontier. He was mostly a kid who learned fast that the Old West didn't reward innocence. The people around him, lawmen, cattle barons, ranchers, and political players, were more dangerous than any single outlaw, especially during the Lincoln County War. And if you place Billy inside that messy environment, instead of treating him like a mythological figure, you start seeing why he acted the way he did. He wasn't chasing trouble for fun. Trouble crashed into him because he lived in a world where alliances changed overnight and everyone carried a gun. The danger label didn't come out of nowhere, though. New evidence from letters, eyewitness accounts, and later investigations shows he wasn't just an unlucky cowboy with a tragic backstory. He could be incredibly lethal when he needed to be. He wasn't waving pistols around like a movie bandit, but he was quick, precise, and absolutely willing to pull the trigger when cornered. People like to say he killed 21 men, one for every year of his life. That's complete folklore. Verified numbers put him closer to 4, maybe 8, depending on how you interpret some dusty court notes and newspaper contradictions. But even if the number is small, the situations behind them were explosive. The kid had this strange charisma that made half the Old West either want to protect him or bring his head in for a reward. And that charisma made him even more dangerous because people underestimated him. Lawmen who thought he was just a teenager with attitude walked into fights thinking they'd scare him straight. Instead, they often ended up outsmarted or outgunned. What's becoming clearer with newer evidence is that the kid's danger wasn't only in his skill with guns, but in his unpredictability. He was charming, polite, almost gentle with kids, women, and ranch hands. Then in the blink of an eye, he'd flip to deadly focus if someone threatened him or his close circle. This dual nature kept everyone on edge. Folks never knew which Billy they were getting, the smiling cowboy who played guitar, or the fast-shooting outlaw who could disappear into the night like he had secret tunnels under the desert. Number 2. The new investigations. Some of the most eye-opening insights into who Billy really was came not from romanticized legends, but from modern researchers digging into old diaries, courtroom transcripts, pawnshop records, and statements from Native American trackers who crossed paths with him. These weren't the kinds of sources people used in the 1930s or 1950s when Hollywood shaped Billy's image. For years, historians relied on biased newspapers that basically served as propaganda machines for local business owners and political rivals. Those papers painted Billy as anything they needed: a menace, a hero, or a scapegoat. But once researchers started cross-referencing documents that had never been analyzed together, including interviews from old lawmen who were never quoted publicly, the picture sharpened dramatically. One of the most important findings is that Billy wasn't the bloodthirsty outlaw newspapers claimed he was. Several modern investigators realized that the kid avoided violence whenever he could. One sheriff's log shows Billy walked away from 3 potential gunfights where other men tried provoking him. They wanted to make a name by shooting the famous Billy the Kid, but he refused the bait. New evidence also shows he tried negotiating peace during the Lincoln County War. Multiple ranchers said he didn't want the conflict to escalate, but he was too deep in it to escape. Another surprising discovery came from Native American accounts in the area. Apache and Navajo trackers mentioned that the kid actually respected their lands and often traded with them without causing trouble. Contrary to the movie portrayals, he didn't ride around provoking every group he met. His danger wasn't a wild, uncontrollable thing. It was targeted. If you crossed him or threatened the small circle he cared about, that's when he became deadly. The new investigations paint him as a strategic fighter, not a chaotic one. There are even notes from lawmen saying Billy apologized after shootings, not in a manipulative way, but almost like he hated the bloodshed but saw no other choice. That doesn't make him innocent. It makes him complicated. The danger he posed wasn't that of a cold-blooded executioner. It was the danger of someone who operated with quick instincts, intense loyalty, and zero hesitation once a threat appeared. And that in the Old West made him more dangerous than someone who was simply violent for no reason, because unpredictable loyalty is harder to anticipate than pure aggression. Number 3. The killings re-examined. Let's break down the key violent events that built Billy's reputation, because this is where new evidence really changes the story. First, the killing of Frank Windy Cahill. Billy was around 15 or 16 when this happened, a scrawny teenager repeatedly bullied by a full-grown blacksmith who outweighed him by a mile. Cahill wasn't some innocent guy who got shot for fun. According to multiple witnesses, he slammed Billy into the ground and tried choking him out. Billy drew his gun because he genuinely thought he'd die otherwise. That alters the danger profile immediately. The kid wasn't hunting victims. He was reacting in fear. Fast forward to the Lincoln County War. This is where most of his killings took place. Back then, it wasn't simple crime. It was a political and economic war between 2 rival groups. Billy was fighting for survival because both sides wanted informants, gunmen, or corpses. When Sheriff Brady was killed, everyone blamed Billy. But newer evaluations suggest he wasn't the main shooter. Witness accounts and trajectory analyses imply he was just one of several men firing. People pinned the blame on him because he was an easy target. He already had a reputation. Then there's the killing of Joe Grant. That story highlights Billy's intelligence more than his bloodlust. Grant tried shooting Billy with a stolen gun, but Billy quietly rotated the cylinder earlier, knowing Grant was volatile. When Grant pulled the trigger, his gun clicked empty. Billy shot second, but accurate. That wasn't recklessness. That was cold survival instinct mixed with sharp observation. The escape from Lincoln County Jail in 1881 is perhaps Billy's most controversial violent moment. 2 deputies, James Bell and Bob Olinger, were killed. But again, context matters. Bell wasn't murdered in cold blood. Billy shot him while escaping because Bell was actively pursuing him downstairs. It wasn't an execution, it was a desperate breakout. As for Olinger, evidence shows he was a notoriously brutal lawman who abused Billy and bragged about how he'd kill him. When Billy got Ollinger's shotgun and used it against him, that was personal, but not random. Was it violent? Absolutely. Was it senseless? Not really. The Old West ran on unwritten rules. If a lawman acted like an outlaw, don't expect mercy when the tables turn. This is the part where historians realized Billy's danger wasn't random destruction. Every killing was tied to a confrontation he didn't start or couldn't escape. Newer court findings even point out that Billy tried surrendering twice before the final events, but was denied fair treatment. That paints a different picture. A dangerous outlaw, yes, but not a rampaging killer. He was someone who fought when cornered, not someone who hunted men for sport. Number 4. The mindset behind the gun. Understanding how dangerous Billy the Kid was means understanding what was going through his head during those violent years. He wasn't a psychopath. He wasn't a warrior dreaming of glory. He was a young man shaped by abandonment, poverty, and a world where trust could get you killed. And that world, the Old West, was far more chaotic than movies show. Billy grew up with almost no stability. His mother died when he was young, and he drifted through foster homes, saloons, and ranches. That kind of life teaches you to adapt instantly. You don't wait to see who draws first. You don't assume someone is bluffing. You act. And Billy acted faster than almost anyone alive at the time. Several eyewitnesses said he had a calm confidence during tense moments, not the wild-eyed rage that newspapers described. He studied people constantly, almost like someone reading a poker table. That ability to read the room made him dangerous in a uniquely psychological way. He anticipated threats before others even noticed them forming. When lawmen described him, they often mentioned he seemed older mentally than physically. He wasn't a trigger-happy kid. He was a survivor with finely tuned instincts. But he also had this strange optimism, almost a playful side, that made people lower their guard. And that, ironically, increased the danger. You never fully knew when the kid decided that a situation had crossed a line. One moment he'd be joking around. The next he'd defend himself with lethal precision. New evidence from personal letters and statements shows he had a deep sense of loyalty. He never betrayed his friends, even when it would have saved his life. That loyalty made him take risks most outlaws wouldn't dare. It also pulled him into feuds that had nothing to do with him originally. Being dangerous in the Old West wasn't just about skill with a gun. It was about how fast someone could adapt to shifting alliances. Billy excelled at that more than almost anyone. He wasn't the biggest, strongest, or most intimidating. But he was quick, alert, socially sharp, and absolutely fearless when the moment demanded it. That made him dangerous in a way that's hard to quantify. He wasn't a killing machine. He was a chaotic variable. Someone whose next move you couldn't predict unless you understood his internal code of loyalty, fairness, and survival. And the more modern researchers dig, the more they realize Billy's danger came from this combination. Not brutality, but unpredictability backed by deadly efficiency. Number 5. Why the law considered him a priority target. Billy wasn't the most violent outlaw in the Old West, not even close. Men like John Wesley Hardin, Clay Allison, or Killin' Jim Miller had far higher body counts and were genuinely feared across multiple states. But those men didn't carry the same political weight. Billy became a priority target not because of the number of people he killed, but because of who he embarrassed and how effectively he undermined the fragile authority in New Mexico territory. Lawmen hated looking foolish, and Billy made more than a few of them look like amateurs. His escapes were legendary. He slipped out of traps that should have ended him. He outsmarted posses who had more men, more supplies, and legal support behind them. Every time he vanished into the desert or into the Mexican border towns, reporters made the story bigger than life. Suddenly, the local sheriffs weren't just chasing an outlaw. They were chasing a walking threat to their reputation. The kid's charming personality made it even worse. Ordinary ranch hands liked him. Hispanic families fed him and hid him. Cowboys treated him like a folk hero. That kind of social support meant Billy could move through territory almost invisibly. He blended in with the same ease as someone passing through back doors and barns. Lawmen hated that even more than his gunfights. In a region where loyalties were thin, having someone like Billy gathering sympathizers threatened the entire power structure. New evidence shows that multiple deputies reported difficulty capturing him because locals lied to protect him. Some even sent riders ahead to warn him when process were on the way. To lawmen, this wasn't just about arresting a criminal. This became about restoring control, proving the badge meant something. And after Billy killed deputies Bell and Ollinger during his escape, everything snapped. The law no longer saw a teenager trying to survive. They saw a symbol that had to be taken down. Not captured, not negotiated with, eliminated. This is why Pat Garrett, who had once known Billy, pursued him with such intensity. Their relationship wasn't a dramatic friendship like Hollywood likes to show, but they knew each other. Garrett understood that if Billy remained free, his legend would keep growing. And a growing legend meant shrinking authority for the sheriffs, deputies, and county officials trying to stabilize the territory. That political mixture made Billy far more dangerous in the eyes of the law than he actually was in terms of violence. If the Old West had PR problems, Billy was the #1 crisis. Number 6. How outlaws and cowboys interpreted his danger. Among outlaws, Billy had a different kind of reputation. One that was a mix of admiration, curiosity, and competition. He didn't run a gang, didn't have a large crew, and didn't operate like most criminal leaders of the time. He didn't want to be a kingpin, he wanted to survive. But to younger cowboys, he represented a rare thing. Someone their age standing up to powerful ranchers and living long enough to tell the story. Outlaws normally didn't keep long-term loyalty. Betrayal was common, partnerships ended with bullets, and power struggles turned saloons into battlegrounds. But Billy's loyalty to his friends made him strangely magnetic. Older outlaws respected that, younger ones idolized it, and rivals despised it. What made him dangerous in this world wasn't how many men he had killed. It was that people believed he could kill if he wanted to. That perception alone drew hot-headed cowboys into unnecessary fights. Some wanted to prove they were faster. Others wanted to use him to boost their own reputations, good or bad. Multiple accounts show that men would provoke him deliberately, hoping to survive a confrontation and then brag about it. But Billy had this peculiar balance in his personality. He never escalated first, yet he reacted quicker than anyone else when pushed. Outlaws interpreted that as confidence. Cowhands interpreted it as fearlessness. Rivals interpreted it as arrogance. It created a social environment where Billy was constantly being tested. Even when he didn't want to fight, trouble followed him like a shadow. A man with a reputation in the Old West didn't get to walk away quietly. Someone always wanted to challenge him, include him, or destroy him. And then there were Native American groups who crossed paths with him. Newer accounts show they didn't view him as an enemy. He respected boundaries and even spoke enough Spanish to communicate in border regions where languages mixed. He didn't treat tribes like obstacles or targets, and since many outlaws harassed native groups, this behavior made Billy stand out. It created a kind of grudging respect. Not alliance, just recognition that he wasn't hostile. Outlaws saw this as another example of Billy's ability to move freely in environments where most men would have been shot or chased off. That adaptability added to his danger because it meant he could be anywhere on ranches, in canyons, among Mexican villagers, or trading in native territories. Cowboys said he was like smoke, hard to hold, hard to pin down, always slipping through cracks. That reputation can be more powerful than any number on a kill list. Number 7. The social factor that made him unpredictably dangerous. Billy's charm was one of the strangest elements of his danger profile. Most feared outlaws in the Old West were large, rugged, angry men who intimidated with their presence. Billy wasn't like that. He was small, skinny, quick on his feet, and had a youthful face. Nearly everyone who met him commented that he looked too young to be an outlaw. Yet behind that disarming appearance was a skilled fighter who never hesitated when threatened. That mismatch confused people and made confrontations more unpredictable. Folks didn't know whether they were talking to a harmless cowboy or a split-second gunfighter who sensed danger before they did. Women in the territory described him as polite, occasionally sweet, and surprisingly respectful. He danced, played guitar, cracked jokes, and helped with chores. That doesn't fit the image of a ruthless killer, but it does fit the psychological profile of someone who understood how to blend into any crowd. He could turn invisible socially, which is a dangerous trait for anyone on the run. If you can charm your way into homes, gatherings, or ranch circles, you can hide in plain sight, and Billy used that advantage constantly. Lawmen complained about it. Some said he had a spell over people, which was their dramatic way of saying he had a likable personality. But here's the twist. That same charm made him even more dangerous to those trying to catch him. If half the population liked him, they'd lie for him. They'd hide him. They'd tip him off before posses arrived. Sheriff records show multiple instances where Billy vanished minutes before officers reached his location because someone warned him. This wasn't random luck. It was social intelligence. Outlaws rarely survived long because they relied only on guns or fear. Billy survived because he used people not cruelly, but cleverly. And this social advantage fed into his unpredictability. A cornered outlaw is dangerous. But a cornered outlaw with friends you don't know about? That's a nightmare for law enforcement. Add to that his youthful impulsiveness, and the danger becomes even more complex. He took risks older outlaws avoided. He trusted quickly, but also reacted emotionally when that trust was betrayed. That combination, loyalty, charm, impulsiveness, and deadly reflexes made him unpredictable. And unpredictable people in volatile environments create explosions nobody sees coming. Number 8. What new evidence proves about his true level of danger. When modern historians, forensic analysts, and researchers started re-examining Billy's life with fresh eyes and newly uncovered documents, a very clear picture emerged. Billy the Kid was dangerous, but in a very specific, controlled, situational way. He wasn't a roaming murderer. He wasn't a chaos engine. He wasn't the trigger-happy psycho that dime novels or early films painted. He was a young, intelligent, hyper-adaptive survivor, navigating one of the most corrupt and violent regions of the American frontier. New evidence from letters, eyewitness statements, and overlooked legal files shows he tried to avoid violence more often than he embraced it. When forced into a fight, he was efficient, quick, and laser-focused. He didn't fire wildly. He made his shots count. He didn't torment innocent settlers. He defended friends and retaliated only when pushed. And he didn't kill 21 men. That was a media invention. The real number is dramatically lower, but even those few cases are enough to show he wasn't harmless. He could be lethal when cornered. This new evidence also proves something else. Billy wasn't an outlaw because he craved danger. He became one because the system around him collapsed. The Lincoln County War forced dozens of young cowboys into roles they never wanted. Billy was simply better at surviving the fallout than most of them. His danger came from the combination of skill, intelligence, desperation, and the twisted politics of New Mexico. In another life, with better opportunities, he probably would have ended up a ranch foreman, a trader, or some kind of frontier scout. But in the life he lived, he grew into a legend because he embodied the Old West's chaotic reality. He was dangerous in the same way lightning is dangerous, unpredictable, powerful, and impossible to contain once it strikes. That's why his legend endures, and why new evidence reshapes him not as a monster, but as a dangerously capable survivor, shaped by forces no one his age should have had to face.